Good evening, dear friends. And here we are for week number 2 of Tanya. And thank you all for joining here. I know it's a season when it's a little bit harder to pin people down for commitments right now. But so I appreciate you all being here. That's wonderful. I'm very excited to be learning with all of you tonight. And before we begin, you gotta make the right. I'm gonna make a plug, unabashed plug, which is we are in the middle of a fundraising campaign, end of year fundraising campaign for Chabad of Bloomfield Hills, with the goal of raising, with God's help, $50,000 at least. Who knows? Maybe we can raise $100,000 with God's help, which will be the fuel for another year of amazing programming and reaching out to the Jewish community and spreading joy and the warmth of Judaism to everybody. And with all of your help and participation and partnership, that's the key word, partnership, we could have this engine of goodness rock away in the coming year. And I know that so many of you already gave with the goodness of your heart. And I want to thank you for partnering and just really being a part of this. And it's so exciting going into new year, new opportunities. And if you haven't donated yet, I want to encourage you to please open up your heart, open up your wallet, and donate to this wonderful cause. And I know I'm biased, but I really do think it's wonderful. And it's all going to be getting more wonderful, dear friends. So thank you all. And with that, right, 60-second commercial break. We are back on. Program is back on. We are learning Tanya here. All right. Hello, Joey. And hello, Carol. Did I say hi to you, Carol, already? Okay. Okay. And if any of you don't have the link to the campaign, just let me know. We'll be very happy to share it with you. All right. So I want to share with you what's going on in today's handout. So the first thing in today's handout is something called Rabbinic approbations. All right. It's page 4 and 5. At least it begins on page 4 in the PDF. And the idea of this is we're not going to be studying this section in the class. The approbations you could study on your own, you could read on your own. The idea is that when the Alter Rebbe wanted to publish a Tanya, it was a pretty daring move. And we spoke about this last week. Nobody has ever done this. Nobody has ever taken deep mysticism and said, let's make it in a format that anybody could study it. It was absolutely groundbreaking and revolutionary. So what he did was he sent the manuscript of his book to 2 of his most trusted colleagues who were great Hasidic masters and saints in their own rights. And he said, give me your opinion. If you think we should print it, we'll print it. And if not, we'll shelve it. So he sent the manuscript to 2 friends. One of the rabbis he sent it to, his name was Rabbi Zusha or Rabbi Zusia, which is the correct pronunciation, Zusha or Zusia of Anapol, which was a great legendary Hasidic master in the world of Hasidic legends, Hasidic stories, and Hasidic folklore. He's a very central character of lots of stories. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him, Rabbi Zusha. Rabbi Zusha famously had a great line that when I get to heaven, I'm not going to be scared of them asking me, why weren't you like Moses? And they're not going to be scared of them asking me, why weren't you like Abraham? But I'm dead scared when they ask me, why weren't you like Zusha? Why weren't you yourself? Why weren't you the person you were meant to be? So that's his line. And if any of you remember, I think a lot of you joined us for our Journey of the Soul course, and we had the song from 8th Day. You remember? Of the student who goes to the Rebbe and says, why don't you have any furniture? And he says, I'm just like you. I'm just passing through. You guys remember that? That was such a wonderful video and song. That's Rabbi Zusha. So Rabbi Zusha was such a beautiful, just such a soulful person because he had a soul on fire. He was the first person the Alter Rebbe sent the text to. And then he sent another text, the same text to another great rabbi who lived in the same town of Anapol or Anipol, Ukraine.
Rabbi, back then, Rabbi.
What was that, Moshe?
They had texting back then. You said he sent a text.
This was like a half a year's worth of orchestrating over here, probably. Now, I don't know. So he sent a letter. And what happened was these people reviewed the Tanya and wrote letters of, they're called approbations, or I think we would better know, in our world, we would probably call them advanced reviews, right? Like publishers do. You give an advanced copy to somebody in the world of academia and journalism. It's like that. They could comment on the book or stuff like that. So that's what it was. And they both put their full thrust of support behind the Tanya. And it's printed in the beginning of Tanya. So I wanted to include it because we're going through Tanya. We're not going to read these in our class, but it's here. I wanted to send it to you and you could read it on your own. And I'll just give you a little bit of a little spoiler that these letters were written with a lot of interesting poetry, which at first glance you read it and it's just a letter. But meanwhile, in the phraseology, there's a lot of meaning in the choice of words, especially you see it in the Hebrew. They're written with a lot of craft. Okay, in any case, then on page 6, there's something called Statement from the Author's Sons. So originally in the Alter Rebbe's lifetime, I just want to show you, this is a book of Tanya, all right, different cover as last week, but the same exact insides. And originally the book of Tanya was printed with, I believe, only 2 sections. The first section that we are learning, the book of the Beinoni, the book of the in-betweeners, which is the mystical, psychological part of Tanya. It speaks very much to the heart and soul. But then part 2 of Tanya, section 2 of Tanya, is the mystical, theological part of Tanya, where we learn all about Jewish theology. What is God? What's God's relationship with the world? Which is which is very, very theological and not psychological. But then after the Alter Rebbe passed away, and Tanya at that point was such a best-selling book, the Alter Rebbe's children decided that we're going to republish Tanya and add a few more manuscripts to the book. So they added a few additional sections, and they wrote this statement, which we have here on page 6, at the beginning of the new version when they added a few more parts of Tanya, which is the way we have Tanya today with 5 distinct sections. So that's that, and you can read that on your own. But today, I want to move to page 9 in your PDF or in your printout. And actually, there's no page 9. It's between page 8 and 10. You have to deduce that it's page 9. But on the top, it says Author's Introduction. So if you have a page which begins with Author's Introduction, that means you are on page 10. And this was very interesting. I want to give you a little bit of background to this letter. The Tanya was printed the Tanya was formally published in the year 1796. This letter, which is printed as the introduction, is really a letter that the Alter Rebbe sent to all of his followers a year before the printing of the Tanya. Why did he send them this letter? There's something which is so ironic about the publishing of the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe was this most celebrated leader. It's quite evident from history that there was just such love for him from the Jewish community, and his following just grew and grew and grew. It was unbelievable. And he dedicated himself in turn to the Jewish community. And everybody knew that he's working on this magnum opus. He was working on this for 20 years. He put so much precision, so much just thought, and so much heart and soul into the book of Tanya. But what ended up happening was, when it was time for the Tanya to get printed, his entire community was upset. Nobody wanted the Tanya to be printed. Can you imagine you're about to publish your best-selling book, and all of your fans are screaming from the rooftops, "Don't do it! Don't do it!" So the Alter Rebbe here is addressing his entire fan base, which is upset that the Tanya is going to print. Now, why in the world would anybody be upset that the Tanya is going to print? So here's the idea. So we spoke last week that the Alter Rebbe was a leader, and he wasn't just a scholar. You know, the Jewish people the Jewish people and the Jewish nation throughout history has had a tremendous amount of scholars. But then there's a very special breed of righteous people who are not just scholars, but they're leaders. They dedicate their lives to the people. And it many times comes at a lot of personal sacrifice, because we're talking about very, very profound souls, which really can mind their own business and have a wonderful life, developing their own spiritual lives and their own relationship with God. And when you become a leader, you lose a lot of that freedom, a lot of that just personal time. So the Alter Rebbe was one of those people who wasn't just a scholar, he was a leader. He devoted himself to the people. And Jewish people flocked to him. And one of the things that the Alter Rebbe did, which was a hallmark of real true Jewish leaders, is helping individuals, giving attention not just to the collective, but to individuals, guiding them and leading them. And whenever there's an individual who is hurting, who needs advice, the Rebbe is there for them. And you saw this, even in contemporary times with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which was the Alter Rebbe's great-great-grandson or great-great-great-grandson, 7 generations later. You saw the exact same thing. The Rebbe only assumed a role of leadership in his life, I believe, at the age of 49. Yeah, 40. He was 49 years old. He was only at 49 did the Rebbe become a public figure. Until then, he was leading a very personal, private life, and he was a tzaddik. He was a tzaddik before he was a leader, and we see that. We have his diaries that he wrote in his youth, in his teens, in his 20s, in his 30s. This person was living in a world of spirituality. But once the Rebbe became a leader, he devoted himself to the people. And that means and this is what I'm getting to, that the Rebbe would make time. Okay, Linda did not get the handout, so let me share it. And Linda, please send me an email, Linda or Nicole. Make sure to send me an email so like that we make sure that we have you on the email to get the handout next week, as well as all the other updates. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, it just sent, Linda. So the Rebbe was very unique, that anybody who ever wanted to meet with him, he was available. It's unbelievable. He was just accessible Jewish leadership. He had an office, he had secretaries. You call the office, you said, I want a meeting with the Rebbe, and they would tell you when the next available appointment is. And if it was in 6 months' time, it was in 6 months' time. But you got an appointment. Doesn't matter if you were Jewish, not Jewish, religious, not religious, Chabad, it just didn't make a difference. Man, woman, child. If you want to meet with the Rebbe and just get his personal attention, he'll give it to you. And the Rebbe gave it to people. And the Alter Rebbe did the same. The Alter Rebbe was literally a personal guide and a personal mentor for the personal and inner and spiritual lives of just thousands upon thousands of Jews. And historically, we know the Alter Rebbe's son writes this, that there was a time in his father's life that he had hundreds of thousands of followers. He was literally the leader of the European Jewry, in the European heartland, Russia, Ukraine. It came to a point that the Alter Rebbe simply could not, it just physically wasn't possible to be able to give the time that was necessary to so many Jews. There's only 24 hours in a day. There's only 7 days a week. He was just running out of time. So that was really why the Alter Rebbe felt that he has to write a book. And the book, he's going to capture in this book all of his advice and all of his teachings, whatever he's been giving over to the people and guiding them and helping them lead a better life, a more spiritual life, a life that's more in tune to their souls. He'll put that in book form, and then people won't have to meet with him anymore. You just read the book and that's it. The problem is that as soon as the Hasidim heard that this book is going to be a replacement for personal meetings, they all said, we don't want this book. We don't buy that a book could ever replace a personal mentor. So I want to ask you a question, and I want to hear some ideas from you. I want you to think about this question for a moment. Let's try to get a little bit in the head of this idea. I want you to imagine that you had the opportunity before the Tanya is published. Just imagine you're living and you're part of the Jewish community some 250 years ago. You live in Ukraine, and you could have a meeting with the Alter Rebbe. This is somebody, a great leader, who's going to give you personal attention, and you could ask him your questions, and he will listen to you and give you advice. What would you ask? What are some of those questions that you would take the opportunity to ask? What do you think? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Paulina, go ahead.
How do I find my mission in life?
Oh, how do I find my mission in life? Yeah, that's a great question. Paulina, going straight for it. How do I find my mission in life? How do I know that I'm doing my mission in life? Or in other words, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Purpose. How do I, very
I was
good.
going to ask what the purpose of, what's the meaning of life? And then I was also going to ask what happens to us when we die.
Well, very good. So what's the purpose of life? Which is a little bit more of a relevant question. Right? Because what happens when we die? Maybe it's fascinating, but maybe it's not so relevant. Right? But relevance, yeah. What's the purpose of life? What are we doing here? Well, what are we doing here? That's a great question. Spoiler alert, that's one of the central questions of Tanya. Very good. What other questions? Noah, I see you got your hand up. What do you say, Noah?
Pretty much the same. The biggest question. I'm looking at. I'm struck. Compilers forward, right? Like that's a word, right? Compilers forward. The bracha that he gives is like that. Everyone, isha al mekomo. Everyone in his place should achieve peace and eternal life. And then I looked at this a few days ago in the cycle, but it's like this whole thing about everyone has their makom, like, and they should be able to find it in Torah, but maybe they can't find it. He's going to help them in the book, not to jump ahead or anything, but like he's saying the opening bracha, like I should be in my makom, I should be in my role. Okay, well,
everybody has a place.
Yeah, everyone has a place. Everyone has a place. Everyone has a role, maybe. So, like it's been said, but I would say, go to him and say, "What's my role?"
Oh, very good. Very good. Yeah. What's my purpose in life? Right. Very good. Yeah. What's my role? Not just what's the purpose of life? What's my purpose? What am I here to do? What's my contribution? Okay. Let's get one more idea. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? What do you say? Dr. Levi, you have your hand up? Go for it. But you got to unmute, Doctor.
How do I deal with all the negative people around me?
Oh, how do I deal with people around me? How do I deal with negativity in general?
Right, in general, right.
That's chapter 26. For purpose in life, that's chapter 30. That's chapter 35. Chapter 26 for negativity, chapter 35 for meaning in life. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you don't have any sense of meaning till chapter 35. It's a real buildup. Okay, one more. Shelley, did you just have your hand up? You go for it, Shelley.
You know what I would want to know? We hear so much things in the news and things that are happening in the world. I'd want to ask the Rebbe, what can I do? How can I find the right strengths and my gifts to make the world a better place?
Very good. Oh, very good. How can we bring positivity? What can we be doing? Very good. Yeah, that's a very important question. How do we harness the goodness that we all have? Like, how can we know that we're really doing our part to make the world better? Okay, one more. Linda Nicole.
Hi, this is Linda. I would ask why some of us suffer more than others. Some others are put here and are suffering with illnesses, more than others.
Very good.
What I'm dealing with in my household.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I want to bless you that God should help you.
Thank you.
Whatever blessings you need, you should have. And we should know of no more pain, only of good news. So, amen. All right.
Thank you.
And I want to wish you that very soon we should be able to share with each other good news. So we have over here, I think, a good sampling of very deep questions. Now, I want to ask you a question. How personal of guidance or advice would you get if you would write like into, does the Reader's Digest have that? Like add one of these ask columns. And by the way, nobody ever heard of these people. Somebody decided, who knows who, that this person's a professional, and they get to write your questions about relationships with your mother-in-law, right? You know what I'm talking about? And at the New Year's party, my sister-in-law is going to be there. We're going to get into a fight. So how do we deal with it? And you have some person who doesn't know you and you don't know them, and they're right, and they read your letter and they give you some standard nice response. And all right, meaning it's very nice and meaningful. The experience of a Rebbe was so personal, and you really felt that. And the model that we have for this is with the Alter Rebbe's grandson, the Rebbe. He was so legendary for giving people such attention, and it's unbelievable. He was so famous. He was so famous. He had so many people who wanted his attention. The number one thing, the first impression, and so many people say this about him, that people got from him was that when you spoke with him, you felt like you were the only thing in his world. Like nothing else existed. The Rebbe just spoke with you with such a laser sharp focus. And the Rebbe spoke about this, that when he speaks with people, of the amount of personal investment he puts into it. I'll tell you something very interesting. In 1977, the Rebbe suffered a heart attack. And it was a very, very severe heart attack. Very severe. It was life-threatening. It was an absolute miracle that the Rebbe recovered to his full strength within 6 weeks of a 10 out of 10 heart attack. It's a story for another time. But something very, very interesting that happened there was that the Rebbe refused to rest. The Rebbe needed to rest. He just had a heart attack. The Rebbe had a heart attack on the holiday of Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres. The night after the holiday, this was 2 nights after his heart attack, he asked if he could speak to the Chassidim. So he couldn't go down to the synagogue. He was laying down in bed in his office, but he spoke via intercom. The next day, the day after the holiday, the Rebbe says, "Where's my mail?" So the doctors say, "You're recovering. There's no mail for you." Now, I want to explain to you what it means that the Rebbe got mail. Okay? In 1987, the United States Postal Service released like a study, just like the data of what's going on in the United States Postal Service. How much mail goes through the system every single day, all these types of fun facts. And one of the pieces of data that they released in 1987 was who gets the most mail in America? Who gets the most mail? It's an interesting question. So the number one address in 1987 who got mail was the president. The White House gets the most mail in America. Do you know who number 2 was? Number 2 was the Rebbe. It's unbelievable. 770 Eastern Parkway got the second most mail in the world, in America. And the Rebbe, unlike the president, personally opened up and read and responded to all of the letters sent to him. It was an unbelievable thing. I was saying, who does that? Yeah, Mark, I know, not Santa Claus. I know. You think Santa Claus is not Santa Claus. He wasn't the one. The Rebbe was number 2. And so this is what happened. So the Rebbe says, 3 days after his heart attack, that he wants the mail, and they say, you can't start working. You got to rest. So he says that if he doesn't look at the mail for a few weeks, and then he has to catch up, he's going to get sick again. So he says for his health, he better stay on schedule. And within a few days, Hasidim and Jews worldwide learned that the Rebbe got so sick, so they stopped sending him so much mail. So it did calm down. But the doctors and the Rebbe was adamant. People are writing to me, and they need me to respond. I can't just ignore my mail. And the doctors were they wanted to help the Rebbe recover. So the doctors offered the Rebbe, you know what? Maybe one of your secretaries should read all your mail. They'll write like a very quick recap or like a summary of all the letters. And they'll just tell you, they'll give you a quick summary of what people wrote, and you won't have to sit there and open up mail and read mail. So the Rebbe told the doctors that he said, you are all doctors. Can you ever help people if you never visited them? And all you did was get a report from your nurses, a quick overview of what's happening with your patients. That's no way to help people. You have to give people attention. You have to learn where people are. And the Rebbe said something so profound there. The Rebbe said, when I read letters, I don't just read the letter. I don't just read the lines of the letter. I read in between the lines. I'm not just answering questions, I'm answering people. Right? Behind every question is a person. You know, two people could ask the same question, but they're both coming from different places. It looks like it's the same question, but really different things are bothering them. And the Rebbe says, I'm not just here to answer questions. I want to get to know the person. What's really bothering this person? What does this person need to hear? What's really going to help them? Not just some standard answer, you know, like Google. I'll just share with you one more story because I think it's important to understand how powerful the idea that the Alter Rebbe would speak with people. One time, the Rebbe's secretaries bought the Rebbe a machine, which I guess then was a brand new machine. It probably cost a lot of money. The machine was, you plug it into the wall and you put it and you slide a letter in and it mechanically splits open the envelopes like that. You don't have to put your finger and rip it. So that would sound like a very good thing for the Rebbe. You know, why would the Rebbe have to literally, with his fingers, have to rip open all these letters? Let a machine do it. So the Rebbe told the secretaries that he's not going to use it. So they said, why not? It's a good machine. It will save you time. It will save you effort. So the Rebbe said, letters that Jews sealed, right? You seal the envelope. Envelopes that were sealed with a Jew's tears. A machine should open that letter. Like that's how personal the Rebbe took it. You know, people want my attention. You know, this is not a mechanical process. So that was the experience of a Jew visiting a Rebbe. It was a very, very personal experience, and you felt it, and you knew that it was very real, that the Rebbe was really talking to you. It wasn't impersonal. It wasn't just. It wasn't commercial. It was so personal. And all of a sudden, the Chassidim here, there's a book coming out. Read the book, and you won't have to ever meet the Rebbe again. It makes a lot of sense that all the Chassidim were saying, "I'm sorry, we're not buying this." And therefore, the Alter Rebbe sent a letter. So the Alter Rebbe took this concern very seriously. He didn't reject it. And he wrote a letter. And in the letter, he acknowledges and in a certain way really validates the concerns that could a book really replace meeting the Rebbe. He speaks about the concerns, which is actually very interesting. He really validates them really well. He explains to us the concerns and the legitimacy of the concerns, but then he responds. And he explains, he writes his case, why the Tanya is different. Why the Tanya, on the one hand, is a book, and on the other hand, it's extremely personal and not impersonal. It's not commercial. It captures the whole essence of a Rebbe helping you, which is quite a remarkable claim. That's the gist of the letter, and that's what's happening over here. It was sent out a year before the Tanya was printed, and when the Tanya ultimately was printed, the letter was included as the introduction. So, with that introduction, let us read the introduction. Here we go. On page 9 in your books, in your handouts, let's start reading. And again, the bold is the literal translation. The unbolded text are connecting words that just help the flow, help it a little bit. Help the text be understood a little bit better, a little bit more legible, a little bit more comprehensible. And here we go, author's introduction. A letter that was sent in 1795 to the whole of our community. May God, our rock, bless them and protect them. To you, worthy men, do I call. And this is a standard opening, like a rabbinic opening to a letter. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek God, and may the Almighty listen to you, both great and small, all members of our community in our land and in nearby countries. May each in their own place go in peace and eternal life. Amen. May this be God's will. All right, that's the opening of the letter. That's like a formal greeting. Here we go. Part 1, here's, can a book be your mentor? Or in other words, let's make this question very personal. This is the question we all are going to ask ourselves right now. Is the Tanya a book for me? There's lots of books you could read, but most books are not designed to be personal. Most books are meant to be interesting, fascinating, they're meant to be helpful, but how personal could a book get? And the Tanya really comes with a certain premise, a promise, which the Alter Rebbe writes in the title page. I'm here to teach you a spiritual path, how Judaism is near to you, how Judaism is relevant to you, how Judaism can be something which could touch your heart. And the question I think all of us have is the Tanya really going to do that? Is the Tanya really that silver bullet, right? So that's the question here. So let's read inside. Now, it is well known that throughout our community, it's common for people to say that you can't compare hearing spiritual guidance from a living teacher in flesh and blood to seeing and reading it in books. It's common in the community for people to say a book cannot replace an in-person mentorship meeting. Now, why not? So I want to share with you, there are three reasons why, there were three arguments given why a book can never work as a replacement to meeting the Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe is going to share with us those three arguments. So here's argument number one. Not all readers can understand. So let's read. The reason why, generally speaking, a book cannot provide personal spiritual guidance is because the reader of a book inevitably reads subjectively through the lens of his own understanding and according to the ability and grasp of his mind at that particular time, right? This is the basic rule of human nature. People are subjective. People are subjective. People see everything through their own version, right, of personality, of temperament. Simply, we are wired differently. People read books subjectively. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe continues, we're on top of page 10. So if the reader's mind and opinions are confused, and when it comes to the worship of God, he wanders about in darkness, then only with difficulty will he see the beneficial light that's hidden in the sacred book, even though the content of the sacred book is sweet light to the eyes and healing for the soul. So issue number one, argument number one that was submitted to the Alter Rebbe was, when you write a book, you are limiting your audience. You are not allowing a certain group of people to be able to access your book. Not everybody's advanced enough. Not everybody's educated enough. Certain people, when it comes to spirituality, walk in darkness. They just can't relate to it. So even if the book is good, what's going to happen? You give them a book, and maybe the book is good, but to them it means nothing. To them, they won't be able to get it. They won't be able to get in touch with the message. I guess an example of this would be like reading legal papers, right? You ever read court papers, like legal arguments? And it's like, it's literal gibberish. Like, it's English, yeah, it's English, but not the English that we can understand, right? It's modern day English, but it's not the English that we are used to. We're just not on that level. We have any lawyers here in the room? So what ends up happening is, it's maybe a great legal argument, but to me, it means nothing, right? So Chassidim told the Alter Rebbe, you have hundreds of thousands of Jews, men, women, children, people of all types, people with all different levels of scholarship. How are you ever going to write a book which can talk to everybody? When you have an in-person meeting, you can right away gauge the depth of the person. And if the message needs to be simplified, it needs to be dumbed down, you can do it in person. But in a book, it's impossible to kind of cater to all those audiences. You are limiting so many of your community when you write it in a book. That's argument number one. What do you guys say? It's a good argument? Good argument. It's a basic good argument. Very simple. Here's argument number two. Argument number two is, okay, even for the people who could understand the book, they're advanced enough, they're studious enough, they are spiritually sensitive enough, even for those people, a book will fail them. Even the book can't even help all those people. Why not? Let's read. So the Alter Rebbe writes, and besides this concern, right? Besides this concern, when texts of religious inspiration are based on human reasoning by a single author, they certainly cannot have a universal appeal because the minds and attitudes of readers are not alike. And what inspires or stimulates one mind won't inspire or stimulate another. Here's another very important rule in human psychology. People are different. And you know what's so funny? Today, we don't appreciate that idea that people are different. In today's day and age, everybody has to think alike. If you think differently than me, you're off your rockers, right? You're crazy, I'm normal. No. There's a lot of diversity in the way minds think. I experience it many times, which is always so fascinating. Sometimes, like I offer a course topic, right? We do 4 courses a year, and some courses are more popular, some courses are less popular. And sometimes we'll do a course on a topic and somebody will say, Rabbi, wow, this is so exciting. I cannot wait to join this course. It's exactly what I want to study about. And then somebody else tells me, Rabbi, this topic literally does not interest me one bit. I'm not showing up. I'm like, 1 second. Is it good or is it bad? It's both. For some people, it's good. For some people, it's bad. Not everybody thinks the same. And even when you give a class, sometimes I give a class and one person says, Rabbi, that class touched me so deeply. Somebody else says, this class, yeah, it was nice. It didn't mean anything to me. It's a very interesting thing. People are wired differently. People are literally hardwired differently. We all have a brain and we all have a heart, but at the end of the day, our minds and hearts don't all work exactly the same. And we're going to read it in a moment, but I want to already highlight to you, there's a teaching from our sages. It's such a beautiful teaching. And it's such a simple teaching, and yet I feel today, as I mentioned, we're not in tune enough with this teaching. Our sages say in the Talmud that the exact same way, there's no 2 people who look alike, no 2 people think alike. That's it. As simple as that. There is tremendous diversity in the way people think. There's tremendous diversity in people's inner worlds, in the inner life. The challenges that we go through, the struggles we go through, our needs, it's so diverse. It's all different. Very good. And Linda is writing, we also have different experiences and point of references. Very good. Exactly. We're just all so different and our needs are different and it's so nuanced. And the argument here is you're writing a book. How could you write one book which talks to everybody? It just doesn't work that way. It's impossible. A book is limited in form, right? You're limiting your messaging. You're choosing to say this and not this. You're choosing to say it this way and not that way. You're choosing to focus more on this and a little bit less on that. That's just how you write books. Chapter 1 goes before chapter 2. But maybe that's not going to work for your audience, or maybe not for your entire audience. Even the best-selling books, New York Times best-selling books, there are people who just, certain books don't work for them. I'm sorry, this is not a book that works for me. And that's the argument over here. Alter Rebbe, even for the people who could appreciate your books, but maybe it's not what they need. We're talking about very deep parts of your life, spiritual and personal development. Could you write a book which is one size fits all? That's the argument. You can't do that. There's no book that's one size fits all. Okay, now, what do you all say? Does this all make sense to you? Right? Are we all on board that there's diversity within humanity? But the Alter is going to bring a proof for it. We're going to proof. Because in the Alter Rebbe's world, truth comes from Torah. So how do you know there's diversity? Because the Torah tells us there's diversity. So here's a proof. You ready? Let's read. All right, the Alter Rebbe writes, as our sages explained, right? How do we know there's diversity? As our sages explained, in connection with the blessing that Jewish law instructs us to recite upon witnessing a gathering of 600,000 Jews. The blessing is, blessed is he who is wise in knowing secrets. Just as their faces are all different, so too their minds are all different from another. With such powerful diversity, we proclaim that only God himself knows the secrets of all these minds. Let me explain to you. There's lots of blessings. Part of Jewish tradition is we make a lot of blessings. I have a cup of orange juice. I need a little bit of a sugar rush, so I went to go get myself some orange juice. Okay, so before you drink orange juice, there's a blessing. You thank God for a gift of life. You make a blessing before you eat or drink. There's blessings that we say upon seeing a force of nature. If you see like a powerful force of nature, you see a tornado. Even if you see thunder and lightning, you say a blessing. You proclaim God's power in nature. There's one blessing which I can probably guarantee that none of us have ever had the opportunity to say. There's a special blessing which a Jew recites when you witness a crowd of 600,000 Jews. Such a powerful crowd, 600,000 Jews. You say a blessing, blessed are you, Lord our God, who is wise in knowing secrets. We say, you, God, know all the secrets. Or in other words, what we're saying is, it's not just that everybody has secrets. Yeah, we all carry around their secrets so we don't tell anybody. But it's even deeper than that. Our personalities are our secrets, right? No one person can ever relate to every single personality. I'm one person. I can only relate to a certain types. I mean, just naturally. There's a limit to how many people I can relate to. At a certain point, I just can't relate to that. It's out of my box. I don't relate to that style. I don't relate to that struggle. I don't experience that, right? As Linda wrote, right? It's not within I don't have that within my reference. Dr. Joel is asking a very good question. Why the number 600,000? I'll leave that question for now, but the number 600,000 is a very, very significant number in Judaism. 600,000. We'll get to that soon, hopefully. So when you see 600,000 people in Judaism, 600,000 Jews represents diversity. You have absolute diversity here. 600,000 is that number of, this is diversity. 600,000 different versions of human personalities, of human minds, and of human hearts. And we say, only God could relate to all of these people. Only God could. A regular human being can't. If you're an author of a book, even if you're an amazing psychologist or a rabbi, or you're such a bright guy, there's gonna be a limit. You cannot relate to every person. Maybe you could relate to 100,000, maybe you could relate to 300,000, not the whole 600,000. There's an inherent limitation. And therefore, right, what's the argument over here? If you're going to write a book of Tanya and you're going to write a lot of good ideas of development, I'm sure it's going to be a great book. It can maybe even be a bestseller. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. It's not going to help everybody. Okay. But there's a but. There's a however. There's always a but, right? This is the style of Jewish reasoning. You give an argument, and there's also a but, and then we have to deal with that but. In Jewish tradition, we believe in the phenomena that God actually bestowed upon certain leaders, certain Jewish leaders, the gift, the godly gift to relate to every Jew. It's a very unique gift. We know this from Joshua. Our sages tell us about Joshua. Joshua was leader number 2 of the Jewish people. You first had Moses, then you had Joshua. And the Talmud tells us, our sages, not the Talmud, our sages in the Medrash tell us that God gave Joshua that gift to be able to relate to every single Jew, all 600,000 versions of humanity. Which seems that maybe certain humans could, right? If the Alter Rebbe maybe has that gift like Joshua had, maybe he could relate to every single Jew. So let's read. However, right back inside, we do find that God has bestowed the power to relate to all Jews, to select leaders of the Jewish people. As Nachmanides wrote in his commentary, Milchamos Hashem, Ibid, explaining Sifri's comment about Joshua, who is described by scripture as a man who has spirit within him. And our sages say a man who has spirit within him. What does that mean? We all have spirit within us. What does it mean that Joshua has spirit within him? So our sages explain Joshua was able to meet the spirit of each individual. It's an amazing gift that God, it's not a human gift. Humans are not capable of this. This is a godly gift. You see this, you really see this throughout history. Special leaders, the Rebbe definitely had this. It's like an unbelievable gift that the Rebbe would meet a stranger and there was such a deep connection, like a soul connection. This is a gift from God, right? Joshua was able to meet the spirit of each individual. So let's say that the Alter Rebbe had this gift. I think that's a very healthy assumption to make. That the Alter Rebbe, as a real Jewish leader, was given the gift by God to be able to relate to every single Jew. But what's the argument? Let's keep on reading. However, it is seemingly not possible, even for such a leader, to relate to every Jew through a book, due to the concerns mentioned above. If you want to tell me that there are certain leaders which have the gift to relate to every Jew in person, I'll take that. But they could write a book that could relate to every Jew. That's a bit of a stretch. Right, so we have here two ideas so far. We have argument number one is not everybody will be advanced enough to appreciate the book. Argument number two is even for the people who could appreciate the book and who are wise enough and educated enough, even for those people, maybe the book won't be their style. And not only maybe, it's inevitable. Every book is automatically chooses a style, and not every style is a style of every single person. How are we doing so far? Do these two arguments make sense? It's so fascinating. The Tanya begins with an essay explaining why the Tanya is a bit of a bad idea. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't sound like the best idea if you're an author to explain at the beginning of your book why this book may not work. But the Alter Rebbe does it. Okay, here's argument, but here's level number 3. Level number 3 says, well, what if it's a book of Torah? And a book of Torah has a very unique quality that in Jewish tradition we say, the Torah, every Jew has a very deep connection to the Torah. And even though there's so much diversity, there's 600,000 Jews, every Jew can find his or her personal guide within the Torah. So what if the Tanya is a purely Torah book? Which it is, but maybe if it's a Torah book, then it won't suffer this problem. So the Alter Rebbe says, no, even if it's a Torah book, it's still a problem. A book really cannot replace a mentor. Let's read. We're on the top of page 11. Books based on Torah. So the Alter Rebbe writes, even with texts of religious inspiration that have their foundations in the holy peaks, meaning that they are based on the teachings of our sages of blessed memory. Let's say you have a book which is based on the wisdom of the Torah, of the Talmud, and based on the wisdom of our sages in the Medrash, wealth of beautiful teachings. To whom higher insight was revealed, since the Spirit of God spoke through them. His word was on their tongue, and the Torah of the sages and God are totally one. So the Alter Rebbe is saying that when you look in the Talmud, and you know, the Talmud is really a collection of teachings of rabbis, human beings, men of flesh and blood just like us. But in Judaism, we believe that this is not just human opinions, and it's not even very well educated human opinions. When the sages taught, it was literally the inspiration of God speaking through their mouths. And in Jewish tradition, books of the sages are considered, this is God's Torah. This is one with God. This is godly wisdom. All right. So let's say you have a book which gleans from the wisdom of the sages, which is Torah. And so what if it's Torah? Let's continue. So the Alter Rebbe writes, and all 600,000 soul roots in Israel. You have this here again. There's 600,000 soul roots. Let me just tell this to you quickly. Okay, here's the deal with 600,000. In Jewish tradition and in Jewish mysticism, there are only 600,000 souls. So what's the obvious question? There's a lot more than 600,000 souls. I think we're 14 million Jews alive today, right? We just got back to our pre-Holocaust numbers. Isn't that amazing? We've just now in 2020, or maybe 2021, I think spring 2021, we just got back to our pre-Holocaust numbers. So there's 14 million Jews alive today. What does it mean there's only 600,000 Jews? And there's been millions of Jews alive, or millions and millions and millions of Jews alive throughout history. So the answer is that there's only 600,000 souls, but some of those 600,000 souls break up into more souls. Think a little bit of like a tree, right? A tree begins as a singular stump, and then it branches out. So there's like family trees of souls, and there's the master souls, right? And then those souls split into more souls. So there's like this very fascinating concept of souls belonging to one soul root. Like, who knows, maybe some of us are related spiritually because we both share the same one soul root, right? Because there's only 600,000 soul roots. So in any case, that's the idea with number 600,000. There's 600,000 soul roots in Israel. Let's continue inside. Okay, sorry. Let's begin from the beginning of the paragraph. And all 600,000 soul roots in Israel, their divisions and subdivisions into millions of souls throughout history, down to the soul spark within the most irreverent and ignoble of our people, the children of Israel. Right? Every last Jew, from the greatest to the lowest. Every last Jew, right? Even the one that you think is the lowest type of Jew alive, even he or she. The Alter Rebbe says they are all deeply connected to the Torah. And the Torah connects them deeply with God, the Blessed Holy One, as we know from the sacred Zohar. The Torah is not just a book. The Torah is the language of our soul. It's very deeply connected to our soul. And every single Jew, without exception, has that very deep and real connection to the Torah. So let's continue inside. Every Jew, without exception, has a deep soul bond with the Torah. So if this is the case, seemingly, a spiritual manual based on Torah teachings would have universal appeal and personal relevance to every Jew. Right? If in Judaism we believe that the Torah and every Jew, it's like hand in a glove, it's perfect. Torah speaks to every Jew on a personal level. So what if you write a book, which is pure Torah, guides a person, and will say, oh, this book must speak to every single Jew. So the Alter Rebbe says, nah, even over here we have another problem. It's not so simple. Let's continue. The Alter Rebbe says, however, this is nonetheless insufficient. For the Torah only offers general principles of spiritual guidance aimed at the Jewish people as a whole. The Torah, when you open it up, speaks generally to the Jewish people as a general collective. That's the way the Torah speaks. That's the style of the Torah. I'll explain what this means more in a moment. Back inside. The Torah's personalized message of spiritual guidance for each soul is not explicitly stated and needs to be teased out. I want to explain this to you briefly. This is a very key Jewish idea. It's a Jewish principle. The Torah, on the one hand, was given on Sinai, let's say the 5 books of Moses, and in general, all the Torah, the Talmud, teachings of the Mishnah. And it all has one form. Everything in the Torah has one, it's the way it's written, the simple meaning. We also believe that every single idea in the Torah has many layers of meaning, which is very classical to Jewish study. Whenever you're studying, you're looking at verses and you're analyzing and you're digging and you're trying to glean new insight. So that's the system. Our attitude to Torah is not that it's a closed text. On the one hand, it is untouchable, right? You can't change the Torah. The Torah is unamendable, but at the same time, you could always unpack it. There's layers upon layers of meaning to unpack. Do you know how many layers of meaning there are in each verse in the Torah? I don't know, 5, 10, 100, 200. So Kabbalah tells us something absolutely mind-blowing. Every single idea in Judaism has 600,000 different layers of meaning. Why 600,000? One for each soul. Every single idea in the Torah has its own unique application for your soul that speaks to your specific identity and personality. Every soul is rooted in the Torah. It's a very mind-blowing idea. And what that means is that, yes, you do have, right, there is the key. There is the information that speaks to you in the Torah, but you also got to find it. The way the Torah is written on the surface is the general, and you have to find your specific application. So let's continue reading on page 12. We'll finish this idea, and then we'll take some questions. Top of page 12. So the Alter Rebbe says the Torah only speaks in a general way to the Jewish people as a whole. So the Alter Rebbe continues. And even though the Torah was given not as a closed text, but one that was intended to be expounded upon, to apply the Torah's spiritual guidance to each individual soul in Israel, by using the general principles to derive very specific and detailed applications. For each soul has its spiritual roots in the Torah and can therefore find its personal message in it. Every soul has its message for spiritual growth, for personal growth, the answer to all of your questions in the Torah. But the Alter Rebbe says, even though the answer is there for you, nevertheless, not every person merits to identify his own unique location in the Torah and to tease out the Torah's personalized message to him or her. It's not so simple. And the Alter Rebbe is going to talk a little bit more about this. We'll learn next week that this is a world of its own. The way the Torah speaks to you. On the one hand, the Torah speaks to every single Jew. And what we're not at all saying over here that there's one verse in the Torah that doesn't apply to me. No, God gave us a Torah. Every verse applies to everybody. But in that verse, there's a specific spark. There's an idea which is so compatible. It's your soul's idea in the Torah. And when we get in touch with the idea that's meant for us, it's life-changing. It's magic. But the Alter Rebbe says that's serious business. That's not so simple. So we're back to square one. So how could the Tanya work? That is the question. So the Chassidim were demanding of the Alter Rebbe, please explain to us why you think this is a good idea. How could the Tanya work? And we'll have to leave it as a cliffhanger. We don't have the answer yet, but we'll do it next week. But again, the question for us is, how could we be sure? And are we sure? How do we know if the Tanya is going to be a book which could be for us? I think that's really at the heart of this question, which makes it a very personal question. It's not just a question, a historical question that Jews in Europe were asking in the year 1795. I think it's a question that everybody who begins studying Tanya asks. Is the Tanya for me? Will the Tanya speak to me? That's the pressing question. It's a very important question. And with that, dear friends, it's 8:30. And we'll see you all next week. God willing. Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Same place, same time.
Awesome.
You're very welcome. And it's awesome that you're here.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You're very
Rabbi.
welcome. Let's get some discussion if you would like.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I want to ask you, the 600,000 souls, are these related to the 600,000 Jews at Sinai that were supposedly branched from all of our souls? Is that what they're talking
So when the
about?
Jews left Egypt, there were 600,000 families.
Okay. Oh, well, families, not people. Families.
Not people. There were a lot more than 600,000 people. There were about 3 million people.
We're talking about family.
There were 600,000 men, women, and their children.
So if there's
And
600,
those represented the parent souls of all the Jewish people to come.
so the family was a unit of soul. Is
That's right.
that the way I should look at it?
That's right. So so this is the way it looks. Every single soul has a male component and a female component. The male component goes to a man and the female component goes to a female. They get married, and that's why these two halves become one whole. Right? That's the cliche, but it's a very deep idea in Judaism. So that's one soul, husband and wife, one soul, and they have children. Those are extensions of that first soul, of that one soul. So that's the beginning of the process.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Right? I know that was a bit heavy, right? I said it very quickly, but that's the idea. One soul, 600,000 one souls. Husband and wife don't have two separate souls. It's one soul. Ideally. It's a class for another time.
That's when you meet your soulmate.
That's the idea of a soulmate. That's the idea of a soulmate. That's right. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. May God bless you all. Wonderful seeing all of you. Take care.